Could the Panthers reach go beyond the Tri-County area? We discuss this and more next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Monday, September 16th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez from the Hockey News. You can follow me on X at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on X and Instagram at @LO_FLA Panthers. And shout out to the everydayers who come back here and get your daily Florida Panthers fix and 3 to 4 times a week during the month of September. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. So, Panther fans, grateful to once again be back here on the show to discuss more about the Florida Panthers, and everything is starting to finally. It's starting to feel like the first day of school again, as we saw the skates rookie showcase. We are 2 games through of the rookie showcase, where the Florida Panthers are 1-1 so far through it, and just everything is all coming back together for the season. And I'm very excited to bring this edition of the show with our guest today to discuss more about the Florida Panthers and everything beyond that. And he is play-by-play broadcaster for Sports USA Live, PA announcer for the Miami Marlins, and also from 560 WQAM, and returning guest of the show, Josh Appel. Josh, welcome back, my friend.
It is an absolute honor to be back on the program. Had a couple of celebratory months, but it feels like yesterday.
Absolutely. It feels like yesterday. And that's actually where I want to start with as the first question of the show, because obviously a lot of us are experiencing a championship in the sport of hockey for the very first time. If I'm assuming I'm talking for the fan listening to this from the South Florida region. And I'm thinking of it as when you win a championship in the NFL, you're looking at 8 months of celebrating versus this is one of the latest the Stanley Cup final has ever gotten to. I mean, decades ago, the Stanley Cup playoffs would finish in early May. And it's crazy because there's a part of me that feels that it's too short and I want to continue celebrating, but there's another part of me that just wants the hockey back. Where do you stand on that?
I'm in favor of as much hockey as possible, but I'm not sure what this team will look like in the beginning of the season after playing 2 consecutive long runs through the playoffs into the Stanley Cup Finals, 7 games against the Oilers, really hard-fought, grinded-out series that ended at the end of June. And we know Paul Maurice loves to grind the guys down in training camp, so I'm wondering how the guys will be able to hold up once the season gets going. But with that said, how awesome it is that we're even worrying about this, knowing that there's going to be a cup banner on night 1 of the regular season. It'll soften the blow a little bit. I wish there was a longer layoff just for everybody. But if you're the team that, I feel like it's much easier to approach this issue when you are coming from a Florida Panthers perspective as opposed to an Edmonton Oilers perspective, where you grind it out through 7 games and they look dead tired at the end of game 7. And now they got the short layoff where they're already feeling not sorry for themselves, but not great about how their season ended. And now they got to start a season under the same circumstances, just without, that pesky banner getting raised.
Yeah, and obviously a lot of us have watched the clip of the final few seconds too. And I remember, just if you're looking on the losing side, you see Connor McDavid reaching over towards his bench, and then first thing he's doing is taking off his bucket too there. And then you're thinking of it from the losing side, and obviously the Panthers have been through that the year before and everything. And it's just for the Panthers, obviously easier to swallow. And I mean, just the fact that it's been partying all summer for them. Invites to each other's cup parties, more promotions for like sporting events. We spoke a little bit earlier in the week, last week, about Zito Verhage, Ekblad, and Mikkola at the Dolphins game at week 1. But Matthew Tkachuk, there's a video of him sipping on a mini Stanley Cup right before their Thursday night game against the Buffalo Bills. So that was, and honestly, and also, even before winning the cup, I mean, Matthew Tkachuk has been a big supporter of the Dolphins. I mean, at the All-Star Weekend after party, he was wearing his Jalen Waddle jersey there.
I remember that.
It's great to see the collaboration and the support within each of the other teams.
You mentioned, how we all watched the final few minutes of Game 7. I've lost count of the amount of times I've watched the final few minutes of Game 7. If I'm ever bored, I'll fire up every goal scored from the postseason for the Panthers, or I'll fire up the highlights to Game 7 or the entire celebration. It's something that we'll always get to go back to, and I love that. I mean, it is something I will never get over. It'll never get old watching. And that you could start to feel it last year that was last year's run when they won the Cup. The year before that, when they lost to the Golden Knights in the final, you could start to feel South Florida really start to embrace this team. You felt it with the President's Trophy team. You really started to feel it during the Cup playoff run where they lost to Vegas. It was that Tkachuk interview during the Eastern Conference Finals with the Heat on TNT with Shaq, with Barkley, with that whole crew. And that's really when I started to see this team kind of transcend just Broward County. And that's only continued through the summer and now into where we are now, getting ready to start training camp, the preseason, and the regular season.
Yeah, and for the Panthers, and just taking advantage of all of it. More importantly, not just promoting a team that could, but ultimately getting the ultimate prize. But you've also had your fair share of experiences with Florida Panthers themed days, one of them being Florida Panthers Day at Lone Depot Park just recently. Obviously, there was one the year before when they were just coming off the run to the Stanley Cup final against Vegas. And also, you got to experience one of the days with the Cups too. I like to give you the floor a little bit about, one, how different was this Florida Panthers Day for you at Lone Depot Park for you, and also a little maybe give us a little bit of a backstory about your experiencing your day with the Cup.
So we can start with the day with the Cup, but make sure we go back to Marlins Day so I don't forget if I ramble too much. So the day after, well, actually, let's rewind. Right after they won the Cup, a few buddies of mine and I were trying to think of where we should go to celebrate. I didn't go to the game. I was a miserable wreck the day of Game 7. Didn't really want to spend the money to go and watch them lose in person. I was an emotional wreck. And I know I'm supposed to be this professional broadcaster guy, but the Panthers are one of my first loves in sports. I mean, I've been going to games since I was a little kid. We lived 10 minutes from the arena. Saw a lot of bad hockey over the years. Almost lost the team, of course. And so to have this and then have it get to that point where you're up 3-0, you're like, they can't lose 4 in a row. Like this can't happen. I was a miserable wreck that Monday afternoon. And so my wife and I, we watched together at the house. They obviously won. And then after they won, a couple of buddies of mine who were at the game, we were just trying to figure out where to go. And we had heard potentially that the Cup would end up at Elbow Room after the game. That wasn't the case. We waited for a while for it, but we were fine, whatever. So we went back home. My wife had work the next morning. I did not. I was off that day. And I woke up and I saw a bunch of texts about how the Cup was at Elbow Room. And it was like 10:30 in the morning. And I was like, you know what? I got nothing better to do. I'm going to get up and I'm going to go to Elbow Room. So I went to Elbow Room, knew a couple of people that were upstairs, and got there early enough where it was still kind of a light crowd. And the Cup was on a bar stool. Everybody was taking photos with it. I didn't drink out of it or anything, but it was there. Saw it, found my chance, got my picture, and then everybody was shuffled out of about like 45 minutes later. Everybody was shuffled out of Elbow Room, and the guys took the Cup and partied in a more private area. I have a good friend with the team. He was honored earlier this season or last season for reaching 1,000 professional games as an equipment manager, Train Anderson.
Yep.
Train is an absolute legend, one of the nicest people that I've ever been around. Great family, adorable son, and Train is a fantastic equipment manager. And Train knew he was getting his day with the Cup down here, and he invited my wife and I to be a part of it with him.
Wow.
And it was an incredibly special day, not only because he was nice enough to draw the fantasy football draft order for my league out of the Cup, which is something I never thought I would utter in any universe ever. He was nice enough to do that, but just to be around that and the celebration and see how much this means to them, obviously, but like, it's easy to say, but when you see it and you see all the love and support that Train has and Train's family has, it was a really, really special day. And I'm super thankful that Train had my wife and I be part of it. It was really cool. So basically, it broke down into 3 events over the course of the day. A house, more intimate setting in the morning, a restaurant in Coral Springs in the middle of the day, started to open up a little more. And then he closed out the day at Bo Campers in Fort Lauderdale. And he was still coming from the other event by the time everybody was at Bo Campers on the terrace out there. And he had asked me weeks prior, it'd be really cool if, you maybe like introduced me into the celebration. And I hope he doesn't mind that I'm sharing this, but he's got an incredible background as a child actor and a child spokesperson for a couple of big companies. Like he was in a Ludacris music video, and he was a child spokesman for Coleman. And so I was trying to have fun with the intro and watching the smile on his face as he walked into Bo Campers with everybody cheering for him with the cup above his head. It was really, really cool. And like I said, it was about him. It was about his family. And I was just honored to be a small part of that and just be around the Cup. Like it's so surreal that, we were just able to be that close and that intimate with the greatest trophy in professional sports.
Yeah, and you think about it for someone like Train Anderson, who he was honored on the Bally Sports broadcast earlier this season for his 1,000 game. But when you have someone of the people who don't get the credit of as much as they should, it also goes to show maybe some of the more untold stories of what's not said about them. It's mostly about like how they treat people mostly. And that's what leaves that impact on people too.
You're absolutely right. There are so many different people that contribute to the team's success that you've never heard of, right? Like there are names on that cup that aren't on that cup that are super important to how this team operates and to how they go along on a day-to-day basis. Unsung heroes, if you will. I know that's a cliche term, but it means just as much to them as it does anybody else. And the fact that they get to have that day of celebration for their hard work, because Lord knows, being an equipment manager, it's not a flashy job. There's a lot of hours, a lot of long days, a lot of long nights. And I know the players certainly appreciate all the efforts of the equipment staff. And like I said, just to see someone like Train, like the rest of the equipment guys, different support staffs get their day to celebrate, get their day to be with the Cup because they earned it. It really is special. It really, truly is special.
No doubt. And once again, congratulations publicly to Train Anderson on that. And we're actually going to get to your Marlins Lone Depot Park experience there for the Panthers Day on the other side of the break, because you can see on the YouTube on the timeline, we talk about reach go beyond the Tri-County. So it's a little bit of tying into that conversation too. So we're going to discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And We have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet up to $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every single Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. So just visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. And I'd like to thank you guys once again for making Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Monday here. Once again with radio personality Josh Appel of 560 WQAM Sports USA Live and the PA announcer of the Miami Marlins. So, Josh, obviously we talk about more of you spoke about the Matthew Tkachuk on TNT. We talk about the reach beyond Broward County, obviously reaching more back into Miami-Dade where they first had their inception as a team, but also the relationship that they have with their brothers, which they came in only 6 months apart into the region too. So talk about just the Panthers Day at Lone Depot Park there for you, and how different was it this time around versus the year before?
Well, of course, we have Stanley Cup champion Evan Rodriguez was throwing out a first pitch. We had Sam Reinhart last year, I believe Anton Lundell, Matthew Tkachuk. We had a handful of guys come out to the park and participate in pregame festivities like a first pitch, but never as a Stanley Cup champion.
Yep.
Stanley C. Panther and Victor E. Rat were in attendance. Stanley Cup trophy not in attendance, but we obviously had the special jerseys printed up, Panthers colors with the Marlins logo on the front. It was really cool. Really throughout the summer and throughout the season, we've seen Panthers hats, we've seen Panther jerseys, even on non-Panther nights, Panther shirts. So much so to the point that on our production crew, we have little drops that we play during games. So anytime we'd show someone who had any Panthers gear on, we'd have a growl that we would hit every time they would come up onto the screen. So it's been a thing throughout the summer, and we really leaned into it for Panthers Day at Lone Depot Park. It was a really awesome day. Evan Rodriguez and his family were fantastic. All the staff from the Panthers that showed up, obviously Stanley C. And Victor E. were phenomenal additions. Evan Rodriguez threw a strike, had a sick Marlins hat and a sick Marlins jersey on. I think it's so cool when you can have a day like that. First off, I love the cross promotional stuff between the teams. I think it's so cool. I just love from the athlete side of it, the amount of respect that other athletes in other sports have for each other. And that was kind of on display from Evan Rodriguez that night as well. But just in general, we see all the guys going out to Dolphin games. We know they go out to Heat games too. I'm pretty sure we've seen them at Inter Miami games as well. They really get across the board down here in South Florida. And I love that cross-promotional stuff. It only helps the team get even more popular with people down here. But people love a champion. And we know that that's the case in South Florida too. South Florida loves a winner. And the last few seasons have really gone a long way in building up that fan base now, where the Panthers somehow, who used to be an afterthought, are now one of the teams that bring the most joy to the fans of South Florida. And they weren't really a Dade team, more of a Broward team, sometimes Palm Beach, but that reach has certainly extended down into Miami-Dade County after the last couple of years, which is really cool to see. And I'm glad the Marlins and the Panthers are able to partner up and do things like the Marlins Day that we had a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, and also combining that also with the whole Griffin Conine and Jeff Conine too on that day, pretty cool. Night there at the park, at least from what I saw on TV from it. But you mentioned the reach of in the Tri-County area, and obviously I want to tie this in to what is going on in the rookie showcase with the Panthers and the amount of rinks there are in the Nashville area. And also every time there's a big event that's not hockey, whether it's concert, for example, this Saturday I went to go see Korn, Gajira, and Spirit Boxing at the I Think Financial Amphitheater, Florida Panthers tent. We've seen them at the beach festivals in Fort Lauderdale, Fort Rock at Markham Park, at least from my experience there. But also for the rookie showcase, the broadcast of the Predators mentioned the many rinks that they had. For example, the Predators, 7 Junior Predators sponsored locations, including one in Duluth, Georgia, and one in Huntsville, Alabama, too.
Wow.
Carolina has 5, including one in Wake Forest. Tampa Bay has 8 of them, and one that goes as far as Kissimmee, which is like an hour and a half from there, and 10 outdoor rinks there for them. And the Panthers, 8 local rinks. We spoke about Duclair and the synthetic rinks that he's trying to build around the area too. They have the Panthers sponsor 8 specific rinks in the Tri-County area, even though their ECHL affiliate isn't even in Estero anymore. Part of me wonders if they're going to tap back into that one as far as Junior Panthers. I wonder there, and I'm not really familiar too much with the Key West area, so I wonder is if it's possible for their reach to truly go beyond the Tri-County area. And by the way, at the concert on Saturday, more than 2 handfuls of people that I saw with Florida Panthers gear around. So like you said, they love a winner. So how much do you think that what do you think about the possibility of the outreach beyond the Tri-County?
Well, I don't think it's any question that this team has stepped up its community outreach under this ownership, and I would only imagine that's going to continue because of how successful they've been in growing this game in South Florida. And it's a lot easier to do that when you're doing it as a champion, right? Like you have that cachet as a President's Trophy winner, back-to-back Stanley Cup appearances, and a Stanley Cup final win. That only goes even further in doing so. That name recognition is there among the hockey community. But, you think of Kendall Ice Arena, you think of Pines Ice Arena, the Iceplex in Coral Springs, obviously what they just built in Fort Lauderdale. You mentioned Anthony Duclair and what he's trying to do down here. You got to give it up for Matt Caldwell and everybody else with the Panthers who was involved in community outreach and growing this sport in South Florida. It's so cool to see them not, to just not be the afterthought. Like, and what's even cooler is like how many junior Panthers there are or guys who have just played in South Florida. There's a handful now in the league. And you would imagine that's only going to grow as years go on, right? Like winners create generations of fans. The Panthers have created generations of fans and hockey players probably over the last 4 years of success that they've had. It's really special, and I really don't see it slowing down anytime soon.
Yeah, you think of guys like Brandon Duhaime, Andrew Peak. Those are a few examples of guys in the league right now. But also just about more of
Shane Gostisbehere.
Shane Gostisbehere as well. There's another one. But also just about the alumni on the Panthers who are still involved, like Peter Worrell in Fort Lauderdale. One of the skills coach, Max Ivanov, he was also did a clinic in partnership with the Lucky Pucks hockey club too for their U8 to U14 just recently at the Panthers ice. Then, hey, it's great to see that even though the Panthers moved their practice facility out of there, there's still a big impact there and still a big investment in there too.
As there should be, right? Like we want those rinks to be used. We want youth players playing youth hockey. We want figure skating to go on there too. Like we want men's leagues, beer league. Like we saw Roberto Luongo show up to a men's league game and play in a men's league game the other night. Like how cool. That's how you do it, right? I know those are grown adults who are already all in on hockey, but like that's how you do it, right? You're in the community constantly. You mentioned the tent at the I Think Amphitheater for the rock concert the other night. Like that's how you just have to have that presence. And the Panthers have done such a good job at building that presence. And again, it helps that you're doing it with the cachet of being a winner. But the fact that they're out there as much as they are, that goes such a long way, obviously.
No doubt. And grateful to see that once again, it's been that impactful in the community, and hopefully we see it beyond that. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where the Panthers have made have signed somebody to a PTO, and also we are 2 days away from Media Day, where we're going to be getting Josh's players on or coaches on who he would like to hear from, as we are getting one step closer to it. We're going to discuss that next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Third and final segment here on this Monday, September 16th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day here on a Monday. So we are 22 days away from opening night. Zach Dalpe, Sean Thornton, or the guy who's worn the number the longest in Florida Panthers history, Kirsten Huselius.
What a name.
some of the guys who have worn the number 22 for the Florida Panthers. But the Panthers have signed Matt Luff, right-handed shot winger, to a PTO. He's played 26 games in the AHL last year for Grand Rapids and under the Red Wings affiliation. 18 points, in those 26, but limited to injury too. So the Panthers have brought him, have their signing of a PTO. So we, like I said at the very top, it's feeling like the first day of school coming back for everyone, where now there's going to be the questions constantly of, hey, what'd you do this summer for the cup celebrations? Hey, who would you share it with? It's going to be some of them are going to be those cookie cutter questions, obviously,
right.
which it's something to expect. But who's someone that you are most looking forward to hearing from Media Day, Josh?
I'm a sucker for Paul Maurice. I go on with Hawk and Crowder usually once a week, and we use program just like this one. And on my little lower third, I have Paul Ball Lifer on there. I can listen to Paul Maurice talk for hours. And I mentioned it earlier. I wonder how hard he's going to run these guys in training camp this year, given the short summer and what they just accomplished. Now, I'm not saying you take it easy. We won. The work's done. But I do wonder if he's going to change his approach a little bit. I think he mentioned something after Game 7. Somebody had asked him something along those lines. I do wonder what a couple of months fishing at the lake up in Canada has done to maybe change his perspective, if at all. I want to hear from Matthew Tkachuk. I want to hear from Sam Reinhart. I want to hear from the new guys too. Like, I want to hear from Nate Schmidt. I wonder if Spencer Knight is going to give a little more just about what he's thinking going into camp as the backup. Obviously, he'll compete with Chris Drieger. Welcome back, Chris. I'm sure they're going to compete, but it seems like it's Spencer Knight's job to lose. So I'm curious to see what his mindset is as he enters camp. There are a lot of fun storylines. As far as Matt Luff is concerned, I got to be honest, I don't know much about the guy. Mm-hmm. I saw that they made that move. I know that there is a lot of roster clogging, for lack of a better way to put it, at the bottom of the roster. Like, there really aren't that many spots for a guy on a PTO. And that's not even considering, Mackie Samoskevich, Justin Sordiff, guys like that. William Lockwood, I would imagine, will be in the mix again to try and make the team. You brought up Zach Dalpe. I'm not sure if he's back with the organization, but if he is, I'm sure he's going to challenge in some way, shape, or form. So Matt Luff, welcome. Get ready for a hard camp. Maybe he surprises a lot of people and is able to make the team. Maybe turns into some AHL depth, which you can never have enough of. So I'm just curious to see how he fits in, because it seems like, for the most part, like, they'll probably battle for what that fourth line is going to look like, just generally speaking. But things kind of seem mostly set in this lineup. There's like a spot or two that are up for grabs.
Yeah, at this point, you're trying to see if there's a position for an eighth defenseman, because a seventh defenseman, with the guys like Thomas Bjornfoot, who's going to probably try to challenge for one too. Another one is Mackenzie Entwistle for the Panthers, who's trying to challenge for that too.
I didn't even mention him. I'm intrigued by him. Entwistle's a big dude, man. And I think he would fit his style, just being that large. He'd fit in maybe pretty well if he's able to make the team, or whenever he gets his opportunity. I want to say, wasn't he was heavily involved in that Penguins Blackhawks game from not this past season, but the season prior, that ultimately helped lift the Panthers into the postseason. I'm pretty sure he was a big part of that game.
Yeah, so he was on the team for sure there. I remember Andreas Athanasiou was definitely an impact player there.
There was a Johnson out there too, scoring a big goal.
Yeah, so that was a big night in Florida Panthers history, which happened to be an off day for the Panthers too. And it's crazy thinking that the night before was an OTL against the Leafs. It's like, you never been happier for an OTL, and then looking back on an off day for the Panthers. But going back to just the players of who we want to hear from. I just wonder. I don't think the intensity is going to slow down for Paul Maurice going into training camp, but I feel like for media day, I feel like maybe he'll be more clever with his answers too, and just we got to just take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. Is like, hey, he's just going into this media availability first time as a champion, but then it's eventually the page is going to turn and it's back to work. So anything, I just wonder what the clever answers are going to be. I believe when we ask questions to someone like an Aaron Ekblad, which obviously it's a contract year for him, we're not going to get much of what his thinking is. He's not going to reveal too much. But at the same time, there is that elephant in the room where he's a heart and soul guy from the team, first overall pick for that for the Panthers. I mean, it's not necessarily the same exact thing as what Steven Stamkos was last year, but it's still out there.
They have 3 of those guys going into this year: Ekblad, yep, Sam Bennett, and Carter Verhaeghe. I do wonder how that shakes out, but at the end of the day, you have no reason not to trust what Bill Zito and this front office decide to do and what direction they decide to go in. I think that, and I might be going out on a limb here, I think at this point, this regime has earned more than the benefit of the doubt. And so obviously, while we hope that there's a way to keep all 3 guys, and Ekblad's a guy that's taken a lot of heat over the last couple of years, really just since the injury problems have come about. But like, he was a top pair defenseman on a Stanley Cup winning team. He is a guy who's been here for over a decade at this point. Every game in his career, he's going to, I mean, am I going out on a limb here and saying like he's got a great shot at getting his jersey retired when he's done playing? Like, I don't think that's a hot take at all. A handful of guys. I think he's one of these handful of guys that's going to find his jersey next to the Stanley Cup banner one day. I mean, played so many important games, so many important minutes, on so many records for defensemen for this team, and you add the cup win, and just you think of what the guys had to play through. Sometimes I get that it's easy to criticize a guy who's not playing well. He had his moments in this postseason, but generally speaking, he was pretty damn good with Gustav Forsling. Especially in the Cup final. I mean, he was fantastic against those top lines for Edmonton, and somehow he's turned into a guy that, like, he has been a scapegoat for whatever reason. And again, it's okay to say, I'm not saying it's not okay to say when he doesn't play well, but I think that sometimes we lose perspective and we lack perspective on how we talk about these things, because Aaron Ekblad is a cornerstone piece of this franchise, and you can think whatever you want about him, but they just won a Stanley Cup with him as a top pair defenseman, point blank, period. And he made some huge plays throughout the postseason to get them where they were. And I was, obviously you're happy for all the guys, but he's one of the ones that, like, you're even happier for. Like, I like Dmitry Kulikov. Yes. It's one of my favorite stories of that Panther team. Journeyman. It was one of my favorite Panthers when they first drafted him, and he was pretty good with the Panthers, and then he bounces around the league for a while, and it didn't really seem like he was much more than a depth defenseman. And he played and made some huge, huge plays. I mean, obviously everybody is going to remember sweeping the puck out of the crease, leading to Sam Reinhart's game winner at the end of the second period. Like, that is an all-time Florida Panther moment and play, and it is so cool that it's Dmitry Kulikov who is part of that moment because of just his NHL and pro journey. I know this started as an Aaron Ekblad point, but I just keep thinking back at how many cool stories there are from that team, and he's one of them. So just to wrap that up, like, Aaron Ekblad, man, like, I hope there's a way that they're able to figure out a way to keep him. I doubt that it's going to be at the cap number that he's currently getting. I'm not sure really there's any team out there that's going to give him that cap number at this point in his career. I just hope they're able to work out something where he's able to stay, because he is an all-time Florida Panther, and anybody who argues otherwise is wrong. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. And based on that, and then obviously Dmitry Kulikov, I'm very excited to see what's going to happen after his current contract of maybe a development coach or an assistant coach for Kulikov. I think he's going to be very involved with the organization after he hangs up the skates. But even there was a ranking of from the Fifth Line Hockey where they also ranked the Florida Panthers players on where they stand. 4 of them are considered franchise players. Bob Kachuk, 3 of them. 3 of them are Bob Kachuk and Barkov are the franchise guys. Number 1 pairing is Forsling. 2 guys are considered elite in Sam Reinhart and Carter Verhaeghe, and 2 other guys are top, a top pair of defensemen in Aaron Ekblad and Sam Bennett as a top 6. And these are talking about guys, if you were to plug them on different teams, not just Florida Panthers specific too. So you think about everything that's coming, that's still returning for this team and for them. So, I mean, it just goes to show they're in good hands.
As great as the Panthers' depth was last season, and you think of how many big shot blocks and big penalty kills that Kevin Stenlund had, and how difficult he'll be to be replaced. Or you talk about heart and soul guy Ryan Lomberg replacing a guy like that. Nick Cousins is another guy that caught a lot of heat, but he was a great guy in the room. They're replacing an entire 4th line, and that's in theory not all that difficult, but those guys were so important to what this team did last year. They're going to be tough to replace, but you believe in this culture, you believe in what this system and this coaching staff has brought in, and you hope that they can, plug and play those guys. But that's just, it's the realities of winning, right? It's just not realistic to bring back a guy like Brandon Montour at that contract, but you are thrilled for him that he turned around his career, had a career resurgence with the Panthers, and earned a contract like that from Seattle. Panthers lifer Oliver Ekman-Larsson comes here on a prove-it deal after some really, really tough years in Vancouver, and he earns a bigger contract from the Toronto Maple Leafs, regardless of whether it's Toronto or not. Panthers lifer Ryan Lomberg, $2 million the average annual salary. Panthers just can't do that right now, but he's a Panthers lifer. Kevin Stenlund was only here for a year. Panthers lifer. All these guys are always going to be, who was it, Lomberg, who said it in the tunnel before Game 7, win tonight, we walk together forever, or whatever the exact quote was. That is so true with that roster, and it's one of the coolest things.
Yeah, and really can't wait for what's to come. I'm excited for the games where you have the Flames in town, Kraken, Utah Hockey Club, to just what's going to be on the Jumbotron when they do return, and all the stick taps too.
Already getting goosebumps.
Yeah, same here. But Josh, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Grateful to have you once again back here on the show. Tell everybody where they can follow you and your work online, my friend.
At Josh Appel, JOSHAPPEL on Twitter/X. At Josh_Appel on Instagram. And I think that's really all where I'm really at on social media right now. But you can follow me at those 2 spots. Happy to interact with you. Love talking Panthers. And there may be some stuff in the works coming this season. You never know.
Maybe. And in just a few weeks, you will see him back in the broadcast booth doing play-by-play for football. Just a few more weeks away for him.
Week 6, Commanders-Ravens, Sports USA, October 13th or 14th, I think is the actual date. But Week 6, Commanders-Ravens, that's my first game of the year.
Awesome. Can't wait to hear the highlights of your calls, my friend.
Appreciate you.
See you again very soon, my friend.
Absolutely, Armando. Thanks for having me on.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On NHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey, Flip Livingstone, and Stu Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you once again for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. So I'm Armando Velez with Josh Appel, and you've been listening to Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.